What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Goat Talk with Marcus, powered by Poddex, fueled by Goat Fuel. We are at, let's see if I can think off the top of my head. I believe this is episode 18 of 32, I think. In the NFL off-season series. Look at that. I got it right. It's episode 18. Episode 18 of 32 of the NFL off-season series where we recap all 32 teams and their off-seasons. Here we are talking about the New Orleans Saints with my man, my guy, Payton Doyle, the Payton Doyle Show. What's up, man? How you doing?
Doing good, bro. Doing good.
I feel like at this point, asking that question means nothing. I mean, if you guys have been following, Payton was on he's been on 2 of the last 5 episodes. And if you go back even farther, I think Payton's been on this series the most, which you can't get mad at that. But yeah, we're going to talk some Saints here today. Before we start, though, make sure you guys head over to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube already, but if you're not, head over to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. Subscribe to the channel, follow, click on the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes. And head over to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, follow at GTP Marcus. So you don't miss any of my posts, any of my thoughts on Twitter, whether it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes the Twitter fingers want what they want, and I just got to tweet. So make sure you guys follow there. Let's start, though, with the Saints, and we'll talk about I think the most interesting part of the Saints season this season, I think, is the 2 big returns, and that's the return of Jamies Winston. If I'm not mistaken, Jamies went out last season. I believe it was week 10 with the ACL injury, missed the rest of that season, and then we haven't seen Michael Thomas play football for the Saints since their playoff game 2 years ago, which was Drew Brees' last game in the NFL. So it's been a while since we've seen Michael Thomas suit up. It's been not as long a while, but a little while since we've seen Jamies play football for the Saints. What return do you think has a bigger impact on the Saints for this season?
Overall, Jameis would have the bigger impact, mainly just because of positional value, I feel like. Obviously, Michael Thomas, though, was arguably the most productive wide receiver in the NFL the last time that he was fully healthy. We haven't seen him fully healthy in a couple years, though, so we'll see. But I do have the Saints' leading receivers here from last year. Marquez Callaway led the team with 698 yards. Next was Deontay Hardy. Next was Alvin Kamara, and then Traquan Smith. So a lot of people are like, well, we haven't seen Michael Thomas in a few years. Even if he's the third option behind Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry, which if he's fully healthy, he won't be. He'll probably be the number 1. But he's still better than any of those guys, if we're being honest. He's a better option than any of those guys. And then Jameis last year, like you said, only played in 7 games. He was 5-2 as a starter last year. 59% completion, okay. 1,170 yards, okay. 14-3 touchdown interception ratio. That's pretty damn good. Then you have a 102.8 passer rating, which was a career high. 8.7% touchdown percentage, which was a career high. And then probably most importantly, 1.9% interception percentage, which was a career low. So Jameis Winston has proven now that in this offense that he can play efficient and turnover-free football over a stretch of at least half of a season. And we have no reason to believe that he wasn't going to keep that up for the rest of the season. So Jameis had them poised for a playoff run. He got hurt. Obviously, they fell off because, let's be honest, Taysom Hill is not a quarterback. And there you go. I think Jameis he's my pick for comeback player of the year.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I got so much heat for saying this after Tom Brady announced he was going to Tampa Bay, and I don't care. I'm not a Tom Brady hater. It's just facts. Jamies Winston in his last season in Tampa Bay went 30 for 30. He's the first player in the history of football to throw for 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. Guess what else Jamies Winston did that season? He led the league in passing yards that season. He had 5,000, a little over 5,000 yards. I have died on this hill. If you look at that season, the one issue with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that season was the 30 interceptions that James Winston threw, because they were 7-9. They were 1 win, maybe 2, I think, from being a playoff team last season. The one issue was quarterback play. And ironically enough, on the very first episode of Go Talk with Marcus, which the 2-year anniversary of that is coming up in a couple weeks, I said quite boldly that I didn't think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to go to and win the Super Bowl. I was wrong. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did go on to win the Super Bowl that season. But more importantly, I've said since then that if you let's say you don't pick a top tier dude. So we're not talking about Aaron Rodgers. We're not talking about, at the time, Pat Mahomes or I think at that time Russell Wilson was still top 5. Obviously Tom Brady. If you take, let's say, a 6 to 10 guy or an 11 to 15 guy and drop them on that team, what's the difference? The difference is they probably don't win the Super Bowl, but do they make it to the Super Bowl? I'd say so. I mean, they were the 2nd seed in the NFC South that season. They were the third or fourth. No, I'm sorry. They were the 6th seed in the playoffs that season. Like, there wasn't this isn't like, I think, and I get it, it's Tom Brady. I think what's happened is since Tom Brady's got there, we've kind of like over exaggerated what's happened. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 2nd in the NFC South in Tom's first season. They were the 6th seed in the playoffs. They went to Washington and almost lost to the Washington Commanders in that playoff game. They were underdogs to face the Saints because the Saints had swept them that season. They got the job done. And then, of course, they go to Lambeau and whatever. But the fact remains that Jamies Winston didn't play bad. So Jamies Winston last season, I think, was a walking ad for LASIK eye surgery because he was playing really good football. Looked phenomenal in week 1 against my Packers, whatever. But it was really good football. And you're right. Who's to say that he doesn't go on and continue to have a really good season? I think the Saints are a playoff team last season if James Winston doesn't get hurt because they were 5-2 with him. They finished with, 8 wins, 7 or 8 wins or something like that last season. So they struggled to find wins down the stretch. As much as I think that, I mean, look, the last time we saw Michael Thomas, he was a top 5 receiver. I am not ashamed to admit that as it stands right now, Michael Thomas is not on my top 15 wide receivers list. That's because we haven't seen him play in a year. It's the same reason why Deshaun Watson's not in my top 15 quarterbacks, because we haven't seen him play in a year. That matters to me. If it doesn't matter to you, whatever, I don't care. He hasn't played in a year, so I'm not gonna put him in the top 15 over guys that I've seen play more recently than him. When you bring in a Jarvis Landry, when you bring in Chris Olave, and we'll talk about both of those guys later on in the show, you're right. I think Michael Thomas is in a really good position where, number one, there's no pressure on him to be the number 1 guy, although if he's healthy, he will be. But there's no pressure on him to be because you have talent that you brought in as a rookie. You brought in a vet in Jarvis Landry, and not to mention all the talents you still have on the depth chart that had to step up in your absence last season without Jarvis Landry and without Chris Olave before they joined the team this past offseason. So I do think that Jamies is going to be more important because he's the quarterback. You're not going to win games with Taysom Hill as quarterback. I'm not going to spoil too much of the episode that's dropping as the season gets closer, but I am going to say, I'll save it for later in the show. Let's move on now. Let's talk about, again, more acquisitions, right? The Saints, I think, made a lot of interesting acquisitions, all of which are going to improve the team overall, right? They made a big veteran acquisition on the offense with Jarvis Landry, and they also added Tyrann Mathieu. He's come home to New Orleans. He played football at LSU, so now he's back in New Orleans, which is, I feel like this is a no-brainer, but like which acquisition between these two do you think has the bigger long-term impact as well?
Definitely Tyrann Mathieu. This was a defense last year that was top 10 in almost every major statistical category in both the running game and passing game that you could come up with. And Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, the man behind the plan, the man with the plan, is still the head coach, and he's still there, and he's still, odds are, going to be calling the defensive plays for them as well. So now you're adding a leader in Tyrann Mathieu, a veteran who knows what it takes to win, who also is still extremely talented as a safety, and is just another piece to this defense that is just going to make them, they're going to keep that top 10 status year in, year out.
Of course. You go back to last year, obviously they were top 10. The year before that, they were top 5. In fact, they're the only team in the NFL 2 years ago to post a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense. The year before that, they were top 10. The year before that, they were like top 12. So this has been a really good defense for the past couple seasons. I think what's been most interesting, and they don't play the same position, right? But when Malcolm Jenkins announced his retirement, unfortunately, he is a 2-time Super Bowl champion. Obviously, he plays the cornerback position, right? But to lose that Super Bowl champion veteran presence there, and then to bring in another Super Bowl champion veteran presence in Tyrann Mathieu, I think is massive. I've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years that the only reason why the Chiefs defense was even somewhat good was because of Tyrann Mathieu, because everyone else on the defense, especially in the secondary, just were not. Tyrann Mathieu joining what has been one of the better defenses in the league over the past 3 years. is massive for them. When we talk about what the Saints have done in the division specifically, again, the Bucs have beaten the Saints one time since Tom Brady has joined the Bucs. It was in the playoffs. The Saints are 4-0 against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the regular season, and it's been because of the defense, right? They've beaten them 38-3 one time. They blanked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in one game last season, if I'm not mistaken. So this has been a really good defense. You bring in a guy in Tyrann Mathieu to help that cause. If there's a shot, and we'll talk about later, but if there is even if there's a slightest chance that the Saints have of potentially winning the division, it's going to come from how great their defense is, and bringing in Tyrann Mathieu is massive. I don't want to sleep on the Jarvis Landry acquisition, though. I think the Jarvis Landry acquisition is massive offensively because, again, we're talking about strengthening up this wide receiver core. A wide receiver core that, obviously, upon the impending return of Michael Thomas, you could speculate that, okay, well, maybe Marquez Callaway and all those other guys will be able to do more because they're not primary focuses with Michael Thomas being back. But you've got a guy in Jarvis Landry. He's a veteran in the league. And I think Jarvis Landry is best equipped to be a number 2 receiver. I think your Browns recognized that when they brought in Odell Beckham Jr. And although he suffered and had to deal with injuries and all those things, I think Jarvis Landry excelled when they were both healthy at the number 2 guy. Jarvis Landry obviously came to prominence from Miami being the number 1 guy, but being the number 2 guy, I think, is what serves Jarvis Landry best. To play alongside a healthy Michael Thomas to get some of that attention off of him, I think is perfect for Jarvis Landry. And then, of course, you also have Chris Olave, who just benefits from all this because he's got 2 vets to kind of learn from and sit under the learning tree from. We've talked about Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. So let's talk about now Chris Olave. We know that Garrett Wilson went to the Jets, and obviously we talk about Jameson Williams going to the Lions. Chris Olave, where is the potential long term? Do you think Chris Olave, as far as does he have the potential to be, if he's not already in your mind, the best receiver in this draft?
Oh, no, he definitely has the potential to be the best receiver in this draft. And he has the potential to even win Offensive Rookie of the Year this year. If you think about it, let's think about Jameis as a quarterback here. When he was in Tampa Bay and he had that season where he blew up, he led the league in passing yards and whatnot. And I know he threw a ton of interceptions, but he was throwing the ball around, right? What receiver did he favor the most? Mike Evans is the best receiver on the Buccaneers. Chris Godwin is the wide receiver too. However, when Jameis was there, because Chris Godwin was so good at getting open downfield, and Jameis, we know, loves to push the ball downfield.
He does.
Chris
Absolutely.
Godwin that season led the team in receiving yards and led the team in receiving touchdowns. Chris Olave is that guy. Michael Thomas has never been a deep play threat. He's a move the chains receptions guy. Honestly, same thing with Jarvis Landry. He's a guy you could line up in the slot. He's the guy that's going to move the chains for you. Chris Olave, he has that deep play ability that probably the best out of these wide receivers in this draft class in terms of deep play ability. I know Jameson Williams is great, but let's be honest, he's not probably going to play until about week 7. Then you have Garrett Wilson in New York. Okay, how is he going to fit in with Zach Wilson? I don't know how that offense is going to look. And then you have Drake London. Marcus Mariota's throwing the ball. We don't know what it's going to look like. I know that Jameis Winston favors players and receivers that play like Chris Olave does, and I think he's going to have a big season in his rookie year.
I agree. I mean, and again, it's Chris Olave. Similarly to last season, where I thought that the rookie quarterback that was in the best position was going to go the furthest, and we saw obviously that with Mac Jones being the only Pro Bowler, being the only guy to make the playoffs last season as a rookie. I think the same thing fits for Chris Olave, right? I think, me personally, I'm inclined to. I'm really only looking at 2 guys as being Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's either going to be Chris Olave, or it's going to be Jahan Dotson, and it's going to come down to quarterback play. Call me crazy, but Jamies Winston is going to be a more consistently good quarterback than Carson Wentz is. We haven't seen. Look, I get that Carson Wentz was 27-7 last season, but he should have been like 27-15 last season, maybe 27-20. There were a lot of tough breaks. And I get it. Chris Olave's they're going to be the third option. That's what's best for Chris Olave right now. He's the third option, which means defenses aren't going to be looking for Chris Olave. They're going to be worried about Mike Thomas. They're going to be worried about Jarvis Landry. And as you mentioned, Chris Olave can build the top off the defense. Jahan Dotson in a similar situation. The one issue is you've got Terry McLaurin, who's fantastic. You do have Curtis Samuel, but Curtis Samuel has an injury issue over the past couple seasons. If he's healthy, these two I think are going to have the two best seasons. Jamison Williams is going to miss half the season. Sky Moore could potentially be in this conversation as well, because I know he's out there with Patrick Mahomes, and he's got and Patrick Mahomes loves to throw the ball deep, and Sky Moore can go get it, absolutely. And then of course you got Garrett Wilson. That's going to be an exciting tandem to watch with Wilson throwing to Wilson. I don't think Garrett Wilson's going to be able to do enough. The Jets are going to be able to do enough to get Wilson in the offensive rookie of the year conversation. So I'm looking at I'm looking at Olave, I'm looking at Dotson, maybe Sky Moore, depending on how great he can do for the Chiefs. But they've got Juju and they have MVS. I don't know exactly how many reps we're going to see Sky Moore get. And all those guys are, well, Juju's not, but they already have their deep threat on MVS. So it's going to be interesting to see what Sky Moore looks like. Chris Olave, though, I think he's going to open a lot of eyes, I think, this season. He's really going to excel. We've seen Jamar Chase come into the league, instantly be the number one guy, pretty much, right? We've seen Justin Jefferson into the league, and he wasn't instantly number one guy because they had Adam Thielen, but his next season, his rookie season, last season, he was the number one guy. We've seen a lot of young, DK and Tyler Lockett and Terry McLaurin and AJ Brown kind of have just came into the league and were instantly the number one receiver on their team. Chris Olave isn't that, and I think that's going to work best for him because he gets to kind of produce and kind of make things shake. Similarly to what I think we're going to see him kind of come on, especially in the back half of the season with the Amon-Ra St. Brown did last season for the Lions. Like, he started off kind of slow and it was really quiet for him, but then he really exploded in the second half of the season because of injury and because of things like that. But he really showed that he can thrive as that under the radar guy. And I know that Chris Olave is obviously he was drafted higher and he's a much better receiver, but he's going to have that same thing of being able to just sit behind and kind of thrive as the number 3/2B, depending on what exactly things look like with Jarvis Landry. Let's stay with the offense for just a second. And let's talk about Alvin Kamara, who, he's not hurt or anything. He's fine. But if you guys remember, those guys you don't know, back during the Pro Bowl in Vegas, so way, way, way back in February, Alvin Kamara did get into some, I think it was a domestic abuse or domestic violence kerfuffle. Something along those lines. There is, and I know that the Deshaun Watson stuff has been dominating the headlines and all that stuff, and rightfully so. He needs to keep his hands to himself too. But there is still a potential that Alvin Kamara could also be facing some sort of suspension for that, because that is also a violation of the NFL's code of conduct policy. And last I checked, I don't think we've gotten any updates on what that suspension looks like, if he's getting one. And that's primarily because I think the NFL has had their hands full with everything that's going with Deshaun Watson. Do you see Alvin Kamara being suspended? How many games? How does that affect the Saints coming out if he does get suspended? All that good stuff.
To be honest, I haven't heard a lot about this situation. I've heard that they're talking about suspending him, and the most I've heard was got a notification from Bleacher Report that he might get suspended for 6 games. I don't know what the situation was about. It kind of when he got arrested, I heard about it and I was like, oh wow, that's crazy. And then it kind of got shoved under the rug. No one talked about it, and all of a sudden it's oh yeah, he might be suspended for 6 games. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, I haven't really gotten a chance to read into all that. It would hurt if he got suspended for 6 games, though. I can't lie. It would hurt. But you have a veteran in Mark Ingram in that backfield who could probably hold the fort down and be serviceable for 6 games. And then you also have Tony Jones Jr., who knows the offense. He played in 5 games last year while Alvin Kamara was hurt as well. So you have a backfield that's familiar with the offense. You have a veteran that knows, can probably just give you some juice for 6 games or so, keep the running game afloat. And then while he comes back, obviously when Kamara comes back, he'll be much more well-suited in the run game.
Yeah. So I misspoke a little bit. It wasn't domestic abuse. It's not funny, but just I chuckle sometimes. I'm sorry. Alvin Kamara apparently punched the dude 8 times. So he got booked for battery and he broke his eye or fractured this part of his your eye socket, basically. And it looks like, at least 6 game suspension and a felony battery. No one knows if it's official, but it could be 6, it could be more, it could be less. I think they'll be fine. Mark Ingram is I love Mark Ingram, dude. If I could just fanboy over Mark Ingram for just a second. Mark Ingram is fantastic. He is a splendid personality. I love everything about Mark Ingram as a person, as a football player. And I think they'll be fine. I think they will be just fine. I don't know how many more years Mark has left, but I do know though that Mark Ingram, I mean, he's coming back to Baltimore, or he's coming back to not Baltimore. He's coming back to New Orleans. I think he'll do good. I think the last time we saw Mark Ingram in New Orleans, we're talking about, which was, where he was drafted. We're talking about 2 seasons with over 1,000 yards. That was in 2016 and 2017. He was a Pro Bowl in 2017. He was also a Pro Bowl in 2019 at 30 years old. He logged over 1,000 yards there as well. Came back last season to New Orleans after being traded from the Texans. Had 260 yards rushing, had a touchdown in there as well. But he's just like he's still good.
Yeah,
is the point. He's still good and he's still very reliable to start things off for you for at least the first 6 weeks or more or less, depending on how the NFL feels about the whole situation. Last but not least,
just to add on to that, an Alvin Kamara suspension wouldn't necessarily hurt the Saints' run game as much as it would hurt the passing game. Because Alvin Kamara is, if we're being honest, Alvin Kamara is a slightly above average runner. He really finds his worth in the passing game, and losing an option like that out of the backfield for that offense would hurt. The running game will be fine because, like you said, Mark Ingram's a vet, and Mark Ingram can hold down the fort for 6 games. He might not have juice to carry on for a whole season as the number 1 back, but I feel like for 6 games, he could definitely hold down the fort. But when you lose Alvin Kamara, you're losing the dynamic playmaker that he is as a pass catcher out of the backfield.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about, first of all, and this is just what we're talking about as a receiver. Alvin Kamara, his first 3 seasons, 81 in a row, 81 receptions in a row. He doubled down on that his 4th season, 2020, with 83. He probably would have had just as many last season if he wasn't dealing with so many injury. He only started 10 games last season. He did play 13. He missed a couple games because of injury and all that stuff. But I mean, we're talking about a guy in Alvin Kamara who each of his years in his career, he's had 826 yards receiving, 709 yards receiving, 533 yards, 756, and last year he had 439. Like, he is really good as a receiver. He's yet to have 1,000 yards rushing. He flirted with it in 2020 with 932, but he's yet to have 1,000 yards rushing. But I mean, he is both. I think he's the epitome of a dual threat back. He can do a little bit of both, and it works. It works for him. It works for him, and it's worked for the Saints to this point. Lastly, not the last thing, but let's talk about Dennis Allen, who is now taken the place of Sean Payton as the head coach. Sean Payton retired, although there's rumors that maybe he could not be retired and he's just moving on from New Orleans to potentially go coach the Dallas Cowboys. Do believe when the Cowboys episode comes out, that will be a point of discussion. Dennis Allen, head coach, was defensive coordinator last season. We talked a lot about at the top of the show how great this defense has been over the past couple years. Do you like this move? What does Dennis Allen being the head coach mean as far as the continuity of the Saints moving forward this season?
I mean, I love that they hired Dennis Allen as their head coach, because we've seen him as the interim coach pitch a shutout against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and win with their backup quarterback in Taysom Hill. That's pretty good stuff. And you have a guy that's been with the organization for a few years now. A lot of people were worried when Sean Payton stepped down, and they're like, oh man, I don't know about the Saints this year and this and that. Well, I'm here to tell you that there's not much turnaround. Not a lot of turnaround happened when they lost Sean Payton. I actually think that the Saints won't miss a beat when it comes to their coaching without Sean Payton, mainly because they kept their offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael, who's entering his 14th season as the Saints offensive coordinator and has been with the organization since 2006. So there you go. Like, you have consistency throughout. Dennis Allen, like I said earlier, still probably is going to be the defensive play caller. Not much is going to change. The offense is still the same as it was last year. Obviously, you don't have Sean Payton there, so but you still have the same scheme. It's not a whole new playbook. Most teams, when they have a a head coach as Sean Payton retire, blow it all up, and they restart new coordinators, new this and new that. The Saints didn't do that. The Saints still have continuity throughout their organization, and not much has changed. So I don't see the Saints dropping off. People are so worried, oh, Sean Payton's gone, the Saints are going to suck this year. I doubt it.
The only way the Saints suck this season is if Jamies Winston gets hurt again.
Yeah.
I will go out on a limb here, and you can call it a hot take. I don't have the graphic prepared because I don't think it's a hot take. I just believe this. I think Dennis Allen could be a dark horse for Coach of the Year because of how great he coached in that game that they won with their backup against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who at the time were the defending Super Bowl champions, shut him out completely. Like, the offense just looked anemic, the Tampa Bay's offense. You've bolstered the defense, and you know that Dennis Allen is loving the addition of Tyrann Mathieu to that defense, obviously, because of just how prolific he can be and how prolific the defense can be as a whole. I think this New Orleans Saints team has a potential, like I said, maybe. I'm not betting on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe somehow they find a way to steal the division from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With that being said, how many wins do you have for the New Orleans Saints this season?
I have the Saints second in the NFC South at 12-5. I really, really, really like them this year, and I really think they can make some noise if everyone stays healthy, and especially if Michael Thomas can return to what he was before he started dealing with a lot of injuries.
Yeah, no, this is a potential to be a really, like I said, a really good team. I'm gonna run down for you guys really quickly what the schedule looks like. They start off with all division games. They've got a trip to Atlanta, then they host Tampa Bay, and then they've got a trip to Carolina right there. I'd say 2-1 to start off. They could go 3-0, honestly, just because of how great they've been against Tampa Bay. But realistically, we'll go 2-1. Then they've got the game. I think it's the game that's in Germany against the Vikings, or maybe that's the London game. I don't know which one it is. But they've got Seattle, they've got Cincinnati, then they go to Arizona, Las Vegas, Baltimore, go to Pittsburgh, host the champs, the Rams. Then they go to San Francisco, go to Tampa Bay. Then they've got a late bye, and I think their late bye works perfectly for them because I think that backstretch of when we're talking Vegas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Rams, 49ers, and Bucks could be tough for them. So they get a rest at week 14, and they finish off the week with which is probably the easiest stretch from 15 to 18. They've got Falcons, Browns, Eagles, Panthers. I'm going to say 12-5 too. On the high end, call me crazy, I think the Saints could maybe steal and go to 14. I don't think they will. I wouldn't bet on it, but I mean 12-5 when we're talking about we always split, right, with the Saints and the Bucks because it's Tom Brady. But history has shown us that the Saints, especially defensively, have had Tom Brady's number. I'm inclined to think that they can do that again. I mean, look, you win one of these games against one of these other good teams, like, you know, the game against Vegas or maybe the game against the Rams. You could find yourself in a good situation, which is why I think it's possible that maybe they could steal the division from the Bucks. I am going to go out on an even farther limb of me saying that Dennis Allen is coach of the year. I'm going to take it a step further. I think the Saints are actually going to be, for the first time since maybe 3 years before. So for the first time since the Saints were in the NFC Championship game, we got that absurd no call on the pass interference. I think this is going to be the first time in a long time that the Saints could potentially be legitimate Super Bowl contenders. This is a really good defense, dude. And I know that Jamies Winston doesn't get a lot of love, but we saw what he did. Look, 5-2 and through the first 7 weeks of the season last season, he was playing really good football, including an absolute shellacking of my Green Bay Packers in week 1. It was an embarrassing thing to have to sit through, but I mean, he was playing a really good ball. And listen, I get it. He's not the sexiest quarterback. He's not one of the guys that you think and say, oh, automatically he's going to be the difference. He's not, but this team isn't built all around Jamies Winston. This team is built defensively. They've got the continuity. They improved the defense. They did improve the offense. And I think the addition of Jarvis Landry was a bit of an insurance policy in the event that Michael Thomas doesn't come out fully healthy this season. That you can still have Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave, and not to mention you've got Marquez Callaway and all the guys they had last season. Obviously, you're not going to have Alvin Kamara potentially for the first 6 weeks, but you've got Mark Ingram, and he's going to be doing okay for the running game. This has never really been a run-first football team. This has always been pass-first to run-second. I think, and I said this when they got Jamies Winston as the starter, I always felt that this offense was going to open up a little bit more because as great as Drew Brees was, he was always limited. He didn't really always have that arm strength to go deep down the field. We saw him make those deep throws, but he was much more of the surgical, chain gang kind of quarterback. Let's stick it between 5 to 12 yards, somewhere in there, and kind of hope for the big bang. As you mentioned earlier, Jameis Winston loves to push the ball down the field. That's one of the reasons why the last time we saw him play a full season, he had 30 interceptions. But again, he also threw for 5,000 yards, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had one of the best offenses in the league that season, even though they were only 7-9. So I'm going to go on a limb right now, and I've got 4 more, as you guys know. We'll talk about that later down the line as the season gets closer. But I do have the Saints as a dark horse to win the Super Bowl this season because the defense is really good. I think the offense could be top 5 again this season, and they've had a top. They're the only team, I think. They were the only team a couple years ago to do it. I think the Bills did do it last season. I think they went 1-1 last season. It's not often that you see a team go top 5 in both categories, and usually a team that goes top 5 offensively and a top 5 defensively, that's a team to look out for when it comes time for the playoffs. So 12-5, high end they go 14-3, which would be insane to think of. It all just depends on how the schedule looks. But yeah, 12-5 for the Saints, and maybe we're talking about the Saints potentially as the Super Bowl gets closer as being one of those teams in the final, making that final push to maybe get to the Super Bowl. And I'd like to see Jameis Winston win because Jameis Winston's a funny guy. In the offseason, I would love to see a Jameis Winston post Super Bowl win. I think that would be must see.
Jameis holding the freaking Lombardi. Right?
Yes.
Giving a speech and it's gonna be the funniest thing you could ever possibly imagine.
It is. Listen, Jameis Winston did an interview. I love this interview so much. Jameis Winston did an interview. I don't know if it was during the season or in the off season, and he was talking about his rehab. And this is, and I quote, he said, "As a kid, I always knew that I loved football, but after I got hurt, I realized my true passion was playing football. You can't make that up. That's Jameis Winston, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know what else he could have meant by that, but it made sense in his head. This is the same guy that got in a pregame huddle to pump up his team and said we're gonna eat a W and started months. I think Jameis Winston, listen, we all want to hear everyone say we're going to Disney World. No. I want Jameis Winston on the pedestal or on the podium with the Lombardi in his hand on a hot mic post Super Bowl, because that is going to be the best post Super Bowl speech ever. You can talk about Travis Kelce and his fight for your right to party. You can talk about Nick Foles and tears. You can talk about Clay Matthews and Aaron Rodgers with the World Heavyweight Championship over their right shoulder. Nothing is going to ever beat whatever Jameis Winston says after he wins a Super Bowl, whether it's this season or whatever. If he does, that's a must see. And I think the NFL should do everything in their power to give the fans that. We don't even need a halftime show that year. We don't even need the halftime show. Just give us the speech, and that's it. It is going to go viral instantly, because I don't even think Jameis Winston knows what he's going to say before he starts speaking. And it's comedy every single time. Did you see the clip of Jameis Winston doing the running back drills a couple years ago in the offseason for the Saints? That was insane. Why are you he's the most unintentionally funny guy in the NFL, and you love it.
The video of him freaking dancing with crutches after the game that he tore his ACL.
Yeah.
He's just dancing in the locker room, getting hyped.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
I
love Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's incredible. Listen. I need to see a Jameis Winston Super Bowl win before it's all said and done, because I gotta see that. I gotta see that post game speech. It's gonna be incredible. It's gonna be insane. I want to be in the building. I want to be in the building when I probably won't be, but if I could be in the building when that happens, it would be incredible just to see that. Matter of fact, let me hold the mic. I don't know. Listen, what is it? Fox again? Is it Fox again? Listen. There's a Fox exec out there, right? Happens to be watching this. If the Saints make the Super Bowl, please give me a call. All right, I'll pay for my ticket. That's fine. I just want to be on. I just want to be able to interview Jameis Winston post Super Bowl, win or lose. Because win, it's going to be incredible. Lose, it's still going to be funny. Probably won't be as incredible, won't be as iconic. But win or lose, I just want to talk to Jameis Winston before the Super Bowl, during halftime, and after the Super Bowl, especially if they win, because it's going to be hilarious. It's going to be absolutely hilarious. Enough fanboying about Jamies Winston. Please, Payton, let everybody know where they can find you and all your content.
Yeah, as usual, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok at PD Sports, and then Facebook and Twitter at Payton Doyle Show. And you know the drill. Do that after you subscribe to Marcus, because if you don't, like I said on his story, you're a lame. Confirmed.
I appreciate it. I definitely do appreciate it. Listen, I think the word of the day once again is moron. Don't be a moron. Subscribe to the channel. I don't really know what to say. It's like 70% of you guys that watch my stuff, and I appreciate it. But you guys don't subscribe. Why not? Why are you like? Come on now. This is not. Hey, you're not going to get the milk for free around here. Okay, you're going to buy the cow. Buy the cow. Press the subscribe button so you can get more milk, and it's even better. Like, come on. Let's be serious. Anyway, as always, you guys know where to find me. GTP Marcus on everything: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Go talk with Marcus. iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, Spotify. And YouTube, obviously. So again, for Payton Doyle, the Payton Doyle Show, this is Marcus and Go Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the rest of your lives. And remember, August 2nd is 2 years of GOAT Talk. It's coming up in we're talking like a little over 2 weeks. It's been incredible. And I appreciate it. So yeah, you guys stay groovy and don't be a moron. Just subscribe to the channel. All right. Just do it.